Dear gentlemen from all around the world, welcome. Welcome to the first episode of a long series of videos we are going to produce here at Parisian Gentleman, and that we baptized Sartorial Talks. So why did I decide to start this project, Sartorial Talks? First of all, because many of you have asked for it, and I know that since Parisian Gentlemen have been created in 2009, it's a long time already ago, something like 9 years. I can't believe we're going to be 10 years old in exactly 1 year. But many of you over the years have been appreciated the writings and the piece of writing that we produced on a weekly and monthly basis in French and in English, and some of them in Spanish and Italian and even in Chinese. But more and more I received mails and messages from you, my dear readers, in order to ask me to do some more videos and some live and some more direct communications. Today I'm going to start this series with a subject that I hope will interest many of you. It's my new book, The Italian Gentleman. I suppose many of you have read my first book, The Parisian Gentleman, which was published in 2015. If you didn't read it, you have to read it. I'm just joking. My second book, The Italian Gentleman, it's pretty much the same kind of work that I did with The Parisian Gentleman, except it's totally focused on Italy. And as you know, Italy is what I like to call the Mecca of men's style, because this is where there is the most and the biggest concentration of makers, artisans, shoemakers, tailors, shirt makers, tie makers in the world. So when I was asked by my publisher in 2013, because when I signed my contract for 2 books, 1 book on Paris and 1 book on Italy, The Parisian Gentleman and The Italian Gentleman. And when my publisher asked me to write a book on Italy, I said to him, oh yes, no problem. I know the subject very well. I can do a beautiful book on this subject. And I will try for the first time to give a real overview of the fantastic artisanship that is happening in the Italian peninsula. Well, to be honest with you, I was not aware of the amount of work that this project would represent, because I had this impression that I was already a connoisseur of the matter, that I knew very well the subject, or sufficiently to produce a beautiful book. So when I started writing this book right after the publication of The Parisian Gentleman in the early 2015, I had 2 options. First option was to do like many people are doing in 2017, in these years. That is to say, to stay in my study, to browse the internet, to browse my own website with 2,000 articles, and many of them on Italian tailoring and shoemaking, to compile a lot of data and try to make some comprehensive chapters, and maybe send a photograph on the field to visit the atelier I would have selected, and the artisans, the brands, and all the makers that was part of my list. So that was option 1. Easy, quick, but in my opinion was not sufficient to really dig inside this fantastic treasure, which is the Italian artisanship. Option 2 was to do it the old-fashioned way. That is to say, to go myself in the country and to visit as many ateliers, as many workshops, as many showrooms, as many makers, as many tailors as I could, with my wife Sonia and my photographer Lai Roblin, that many of you may know, because this man is probably the most photographed photographer, because he's also a model for a lot of very famous tailoring houses. And if I count everything that I did around the book, it was a 3-year project. Why? Because we decided to make this book totally, quote-unquote, by hand, tutto fatto a mano. It means that for this special project, we've been visiting more than 100 ateliers, from the mountains of Biella in Piedmont to the island of Sicily, going through Rome and Naples and Florence and Milan. And that was a tremendous amount of work, a tremendous amount of fun, but also a tremendous amount of responsibility. Because the problem with Italy is not to find the artisans, is not even to find the best of the best, is to choose who's going to be featured in that book. And I want to explain this very special point and make it clear to everybody. My book is not an encyclopedia of the Italian artisanship on men's style. It's impossible. It will take a lifetime to do it properly. It's not even a catalogue of all the good makers of Italy. Rather than that, it's my take, personal take, my choice. And sometimes the choices I had to make were extremely difficult, because when you have in a city like Naples, for example, you still have probably, potentially, I would say 50 tailors that would have been able to make it inside the book, but I had to make some choices. The book is organized in big sections, and inside this section there's chapters dedicated to specific houses. So of course, we start with the beginning with a huge chapter on the wool mills and the wool merchants, because many of you don't realize, but the real innovation in menswear and in men's style of the last decades didn't come from the designers, didn't come from the tailors, even if some of them are very creative indeed, but it didn't really come from them. The real innovations of the last decade came from the tremendous progress that the wool industry has made in the possibilities offered by their fabrics. So for example, the famous mill, Zegna, they are releasing these days, for the first time in the history of fabric, a very special wool which is called Tech Merino. What's a Tech Merino? Imagine you go to work with your bespoke unlined jacket in Tech Merino, which is an extremely light and soft fabric, very luxurious. And then after 3 or 4 times, you've been sweating in it, you've been using it, as a day-to-day, as a business suit or a business jacket. And then you take your jacket, you throw it in the washing machine, the wool doesn't wrinkle, and you just have it dry on a hanger, and 2 days after, you can go again without noticing any wrinkle in anything. These are the kind of innovations that are happening right now in the field of the mills. My book also features fantastic houses like Vitale Barberis Canonico. Vitale Barberis Canonico is the oldest wool mill operating on earth, because they've been founded in 1663. And they have been producing wool without interruption, that is to say, going through wars, during some economical crisis, during the fascist era, during everything, without stopping their produce amazingly beautiful fabric. And so there's a chapter who tells their story, which is a very interesting story. There's also a chapter on Piacenza, for example, which is a lesser-known house, which was founded in 1733. Can you believe that? 1733. And these people are producing and specialize in cashmere. And my book tells the story of this amazing family, whom ancestors, for example, were the first to organize expeditions in the very early 1900s in China, in Mongolia. This is where they discovered this fantastic goat which produced the wool, which called cashmere, because as you know, cashmere is not wool from sheep, but it's wool from a goat from Mongolia. And just for the sake of history, one of their ancestors, Mr. Piacenza, was an alpinist, and he did some amazing expedition in the highest mountains in the world. And in this chapter, you will find also some people that I particularly appreciate. They are not directly producers of wool, but who are very important people who are distributing the best wool in the world. And I'm talking about Drapers, which is a fantastic company, which is in Bologna, very well known from the people who are accustomed to the bespoke salon. If you are a bespoke aficionado, you know Drapers. You've seen Drapers Bunch everywhere, because Domenico Lolli, which I salute in this, I take the occasion to give him a warm hello, is a fantastic person who's been working in this industry since decades, and this house was founded by his father. And also a family, an amazing family called Cacciopoli in Napoli. I have a picture in my book of the Cacciopoli brothers and sons, and I think I'm right. I think there are 10 Cacciopolis on the same picture. And if I'm right, I think 5 or 6 of them have the same name, Vincenzo. And those people also are producing and distributing beautiful wool, and their place in Naples is a must-see for anybody interested in the men's style. The second chapter is dedicated to the core part of my work and this book, bespoke tailoring. Honestly, between you and me, tackling a subject like bespoke tailoring in Italy is like trying to explain the Encyclopedia Universalis in 10 minutes. It's probably impossible. And this is the part where maybe I had to make the most dramatic choices, because there's so many tailors, specifically in a city like Naples in the south of Italy. This craft, even if it has been suffering a lot from the mass industrialization of this job and this activity, is still a fantastic place for tailoring. So I feature a little bit more than 20 tailors, from the most famous, Caraceni in Milan, Liverano in Florence, Panico, Sabino, Dal Cuore, Ciardi, big names, fantastic people, great artisan. But also lesser known people like, for example, Gianni Celeghin in Legnano. I still don't understand how a man like that, with such a talent, is not well known all around the world. I have an idea why, because at Gianni Celeghin atelier in Legnano, close to Milan, I'm not sure that the internet is plugged, and I'm not even sure that he knows what an email is. The third chapter, the third section of my book is entitled SARTORIAL. So I make a difference between bespoke tailors and SARTORIAL. A tailor like Pino Peluzzo, or Luigi Dal Cuore, or Pasquale Sabino, or Antonio Panico, all these grandmasters, or Carlo Andreacchio at Caraceni in Milan, or even Antonio Liverano in Florence, they all work in the same way. That is to say, they are drawing the patterns, and then they do the basting, and then they pass it to their team, and everything is made by hand by their team. But a tailor in this kind of houses is able to make a jacket from A to Z. What Kitton and what later Cesare Attolini, which is an enormous name in this industry, managed to do is to do the following, is to say, instead of asking a tailor to do a jacket from A to Z, we're going to ask every person that we hire to be specialized in only 1 or 2 gestures. That is to say, the person at Kitton who is doing lapels or who is attaching the sleeve, which is one of the most difficult parts of a suit, is only doing that. They're hyper specialized. It doesn't mean that they don't know how to do a jacket from A to Z, but this was a new way of organizing the work. And thanks to that, they were able to produce one of the most luxurious garments in the world, but in 25 hours instead of 60 hours. And with that, we can say that Attolini, and specifically Cesare Attolini, the son of the great Vincenzo Attolini, which probably bring about the revolution in men's style, inventing the Napolitan jacket, but everybody knows the story. It's explained very precisely in my book. But with Cesare Attolini and Ciro Paone and people like that, I can say that these people are heroes in their field, because not only they created a new way of producing luxury garments, but also they saved hundreds, if not thousands, of employment in their own country. The fourth chapter is about shirt. It's about shirt making. This is when you're interested in tailoring like me, this is my lab. This is what I do since 10 years. I visit ateliers, I visit factories, I visit artisans. But mainly tailors and shoemakers, and shirt making was something like, not an accessory, because this is something that we wear on a daily basis, all of us, but was for me less technical, less complicated than to craft a suit or a pair of shoes. But I discovered that, in fact, this is not true. And I hope, thanks to my book, you will be more and more interested in this area and discover that the shirt is not only an accessory in the men's wardrobe, but something like a staple. Of course, after that, we go to the accessories. You will discover more and more in your sartorial path if you've been embracing this path, which is a long path. Being sartorially perfect according to your own criterion, that is to say, being happy by the way you express yourself with your own style is not a destination, it's a travel. It's a journey. It never ends. But when you progress along this line, which is, as you know, it can be something like an obsession, and I just give you an advice. If it turns into an obsession, you better cool down. It has to remain a pleasure, and it has to remain a media that you use on a daily basis. But that's another story that I'm going to address in a future episode of Sartorial Talks. But for people who have been embracing this path, they all know, you all know, that the choice of a tie or even of a single piece of silk or wool, like a pocket square, can change the whole feeling, the whole ambience, and the whole statement of any suit. In other words, you can have the best bespoke suit in the world. If you don't know how to pair it with the right tie, you can mess the whole picture. So there's a special chapter on accessories and specifically on ties with beautiful, fantastic, superlative tie makers like Petronius in Milan, like Calabrese in Napoli, like Francesco Marino. Who knows Francesco Marino in Napoli? This is a great company with a father and a son who are producing exquisite tie. And of course, among others, because I can't quote all of them in this interview, the great Marinella, which is probably the most well-known Neapolitan name in the world. And the last section of the book is dedicated to the shoemaking because, as you know, this is one of my big passions in life. My grandfather was a shoemaker himself. Italy is an amazing country for that. When you visit people like Enzo Bonafè. Enzo Bonafè is working in this, he created his company in 63. 63 is the year I'm born. And he's coming from a poor family. His story is just amazing, touching. It's emotional when the old man Bonafè, which is still working every day, making shoes the best he can with a lot of humility. He's speaking about his story. He is very emotional, and this is what Italy is all about. I discovered also people like Antonio Meccariello that we will focus on in the next episode of the Sartorial Talks. Paolo Scafora in Naples, also a great shoemaker. Stivaria Savoia in Milan. It's a fantastic little house, not very well known. And of course, the Bemer family, which is the Florentine family of shoes. As you know, Stefano Bemer passed away in 2012, but his company and his name are very alive with a new management that are doing the job right to preserve his heritage and legacy. And his brother, Mario Bemer, the discreet, humble, kind, great Mario Bemer, he's my friend, this is no secret, who decided to take his own path and to do his own shop with his bootmaker Seiji Miyagawa, who is crafting exquisite bespoke shoes in Florence for a fair price, actually. You will discover this in my book. I must say also that I have a special communication and tribute to address here is that when you are writing a book like that, it's a human experience. It's something that is not normal. 3 years on the road meeting people, I don't know how many, I would say, my evaluation maybe 70 enormous dinners inside the houses of the tailors and shoemakers. I don't know how many thousands of coffees taken quickly in between two visits. It's a human adventure, but it's also something which is touching because maybe you don't know, but during the writing of this book, we lost 3 great people that passed away. The head of Fry, the great shirt maker from Bologna. I'm speaking also specifically of my dear friend Ricardo French, who was one of the most amazingly creative shoemaker in the world. He died at the age of 49. I feel very sad about that. But I know once again that his name and his craft and his fantastic last and his crazy patterns gonna be preserved, because I know there's some people who are taking care of this, and thank God, I'm happy for that. And rest in peace, Freccia, because you were a great guy and we miss you a lot. Last but not least, we lost a few months ago Renato Ciardi. Renato Ciardi, as you know, was one of the founding figures, one of the last of the Mohicans, one of the people who were trained by the great Angelo Blasi in Naples. Renato Ciardi was known to, first of all, to do fantastic Napolitan tailoring, but also to have probably one of the most beautiful smiles in the industry. This man was a dandy. He was constantly happy. He was full of energy. He was sharing his love and his appreciation to everybody. And so I'm happy that we have wonderful portraits of Renato Ciardi and his family in my book. It's a tribute. It was not planned as a tribute, but this chapter is a tribute to a great guy that we're all gonna miss. But for the people who are interested in tailoring, you know that the Ciardi heritage is very well protected also, because Vincenzo Ciardi and Roberto Ciardi, his sons, are at the helm of the company since decades. If I had to do a summary of this work and this book in a few sentences, I would say that British tailoring, which is the founding fathers of tailoring, is British. It's undisputable. Beau Brummel reinvented the modern suit. British tailoring is all about understatement, discretion, conventions, etiquette. French tailoring, it's all about details, amazing craftsmanship, luxurious finishing, haute couture. Italy, it's simpler than this. It's all about freedom. Freedom of movement, freedom of attitude, with bold colors, with daring fabric. And what Italy is bringing into the sartorial world is invaluable. So that's an overview of the Italian Gentleman that will be published in October of this year. So I hope you're gonna love it. I hope it's gonna be useful for you, and it's gonna be interesting for you, and it's gonna give you another insight of the tremendous input of the Italian civilization inside our craft. I hope you will join me again for the next episode of Sartorial Talks, and for now, I will say to you, as I always say at the end of my article, in Parisian Gentleman, cheers.